I know that my introduction was very informal and short. I want you to first explain a little bit about yourself, explain your road to modern day, some of the stops, some of the hurdles, some of the barriers maybe that you punched through and made it through to get where you are today.
Okay. Thank you, Coach. So like you just said, my name is Greg Vandermade. I'm the head strength and conditioning coach at Modern Day High School in Santa Ana, California, which is located in Orange County, Southern California, just a little bit south of LA. My path to Modern Day, I started off, I ground my teeth in the Division I college setting. I was very fortunate throughout my collegiate career to have amazing strength and conditioning coaches that I played underneath. And as I was finishing up playing football, I realized that the training aspect of playing was something that I was extremely passionate about. And I was fortunate enough that I was able to be menteed by some of these great coaches. And I started off, I was a graduate assistant at the University of Tulsa, then became an assistant strength and conditioning coach at the University of Tulsa. I moved on to my first head job at California State University at Fullerton. After Cal State Fullerton, I went into the private sector and was a co-owner of Prolific Athletes, which was down in San Diego. And while I was down there, I was fortunate to work with some amazing athletes, some great coaches, but I definitely got the itch to be in a more team environment, something that was a little bit more of a team setting. And the Modern Day head strength and conditioning position opened up, and I looked into it, and I was very fortunate, and I feel blessed to be able to do what I do. I've been at Modern Day now going on 3 years, and I was able to actually develop the department because prior to me coming on at Modern Day, they outsourced everything, like I'm sure many high school coaches have come across in the past. And what they wanted to do is follow more of a university model where you have a strength and conditioning department that is all in-house. So it's myself, and I have a full-time assistant as well. It's been a great ride. I've absolutely loved every second that I've been in Modern Day, and God willing, it'll be where I spend my career.
That's awesome. Thanks for that, Coach. I appreciate it. I appreciate the introduction because sometimes, just as happened in that early intro, I'll start stuttering over words and start introducing you under the wrong title. So I want to make sure you had that opportunity.
I'll be doing the same. Don't worry about that.
Sometimes we get to introducing other coaches and we start introducing ourselves. I'm so familiar and so used to doing that that's what I started getting into. Coach, if you would, I appreciate that input and that insight and letting us in about yourself. I want to hear a little bit about Modern Day. Tell us a little bit about the demographics of your typical student, about your typical student athlete, who's coming into your school, what a ninth grader looks like, just that what the student population is made up of.
Okay, so Modern Day is very diverse. We're a student population of 2,200. We're a private Catholic school. We're the largest private Catholic school west of the Mississippi. So our student population will get capped at 2,200, and we're pretty much at capacity right now this 2016-2017 school year. We have a very diverse population. You know, we are able to have the surrounding areas of Orange County where we're drawing in from Newport Beach, Huntington, as far south as San Juan Capistrano, and then also more inland where we're bringing in some kids from Santa Ana itself. We'll draw kids from the LA area as well. So we have a real broad spectrum. We really have a broad spectrum of our demographics. I don't think that you could really pinpoint and say that there is a stereotypical Modern Day student just because we come from all walks of life. You know, we have some kids that are coming from very affluent areas, some kids that have more challenges than others. So we really have a diverse population at Modern Day. And I'm fortunate in the sense that with that diverse population that we have, we also have a lot of diversity in our sports. We have 24 varsity sports that we sponsor. Out of that 2,200 students, roughly 50% of them will do a sport at some time or another throughout their career at Modern Day. So a typical freshman would be kind of hard to pinpoint. It would depend really upon the sport. You know, with our football athletes, we're going to have some guys that come in that are fairly put together, but they definitely have room to grow and develop and learn how to move their bodies. Our basketball athletes are going to be very, very similar in that sense too. We have very gifted basketball athletes that come into our program, and a lot of it is teaching them how to use the gifts that they have. And then we'll have other sports where, say it's like a boys lacrosse team where they're coming in, they may be undersized. Now, by the time that they all leave there, When they come in as freshmen, they all have their different areas of improvement that we need to really address and attack to help them become better athletes. But by the time they leave, the number one characteristic that I want to see them have and something that they embrace is just a solid work ethic. You know, that's one of the number one things that we can instill in these kids, and teaching them the value of the hard work. The fruits of their labor are going to come in their championships, as well as helping them get prepared for life. You know, so when those kids come into us, they're going to have all sorts of different backgrounds. They're going to have all sorts of different needs from an athletic standpoint. But at the end of it, we want to make sure that we've helped them along the way progress towards their goal, whether it's getting physically bigger, stronger, faster, whether it's adding size, leaning out. It's just going to be dependent upon the sport that we're dealing with and what that individual's goal is. But when it's all said and done, we see them walk across the stage of graduation. We want to make sure that their heads are held high and that they're very proud of the accomplishments that they did. And it all really stems from the amount of work that they're willing to put in. I'm very fortunate in the sense that I get to work with some really great kids. You know, I wake up every day thanking the Almighty that we're able to have such good kids to work with, because I know that there's other areas where you got to poke and prod to get them to come in. Whereas for us, they view it as something that they embrace, and they also view it as a privilege to be able to compete in athletics in modern day and be able to do everything that comes along with that. And we really kind of hold our strength and conditioning program as not a right, but a privilege. And our kids that are enrolled in our school and that are able to take part in that strength and conditioning program understand that if they're not up to snuff and they're not doing what needs to be done, we're not going to have them around, because we want to have an environment where it's competitive and where the athletes are striving to get better every single day.
Sure, that's excellent. Coach, do you have any, this is kind of a personal question of mine, do you have any international students on campus? Is there any?
We do. I would say right now our big demographic for international students is we have a lot of Chinese international students. I would say that that's our number one demographic. We'll get occasional European students to come in. Sometimes we have them for the full 4 years. We have a basketball athlete of ours right now that is going to be with us for the full 4 years. But we also may get them for a year, you know, so we do have a decent amount of international students. The exact percentage of the school population off the top of my head, I'd be lying to you if I told you if I knew what it was.
And are a lot of those students competing in sports?
I would say in regard to the rest of the student population, those numbers would probably be down.
Okay.
A majority of our international students aren't really geared towards the athletics. That's not their main reason for coming over.
Sure.
We do have some, but I would say that the majority of them are not participating in some form of athletics, but we do have a few.
Awesome. And we talked, this is another personal question or a question that I personally wanted to ask, was based on our conversation. Can you tell us a little bit about maybe maybe not on the West Coast, but for us on the East Coast, one of the most unique sports you work with, and along with that, kind of what in detail working with that sport entails, really?
Going back to kind of what you and I had talked about previously in phone conversations, I'd say one of the most unique sports that we get to work with in modern day, and it's fulfilling to work with them. It's a hell of a lot of fun to work with them, is our water polo programs. Water polo is a huge sport in Orange County. It's really big on the West Coast. I know in other areas of the country it may not be nearly as large, but it really is a unique sport to deal with. For those of you that haven't really worked with water polo before, at face value, most people are like, oh, you know, they're swimming around and shooting the ball around. But when you actually get into it and you see what they have to do, I think the easiest way and the best way to kind of equate it to another sport would be, it's like water wrestling. You know, like the amount of grappling that they do, the conditioning level that they have to have, the strength level that they have to have. So it's really a unique sport to work with, in the sense that you have to combine so many different elements of strength and conditioning to be able to make sure that they're competitive. You know, you're going to have your phases where you're really focusing on strength. For me personally, the way that I look at our water polo program is, it's tough because they really don't have a true off season. You know, we just wrapped up our competitive high school season, and they're going to roll right into their club season. And our athletes are for the most part all a part of the same water polo club. And they'll roll that all the way up into Junior Olympics, which most of you guys know is going to be damn near all the way through summer. So it's interesting in the sense that no matter what time of year I have them in, I always have to have some element of strength endurance with them just to be able to make sure that they are capable of going 4 7-minute all-out quarters. So it's a very interesting sport to deal with. You'll end up having to really kind of evaluate and examine some of your methodologies and the way that you want to attack how you train them, because they're going to have injury areas that are very similar to a swimmer in the shoulder issue. But then they're also going to have, if they're an attacker, they're going to have issues where it's more along the lines of a baseball pitcher and they're starting to get elbow issues, And then on the lower half, when we're looking at it, they're torquing so much as they egg beater that you got to do things to make sure that their knees are not just getting absolutely annihilated by it. So it's a really interesting sport to work with. It really makes you reevaluate and think of the ways that you attack your training with them. And I'm telling you that the groups that I'm able to deal with, both our guys and girls programs, all of our programs at Modern Day are amazing to work with, and all of them are going to give us everything that they have. I could probably write on the board that our water polo workout is to run through that brick wall, and they would probably knock themselves out before they gave up on me. Right. So they're an amazing group to work with. I'd say that it's probably one of the more unique ones that may not be the norm across the board for most high schools to have. I would say that that's probably our one that has a very unique element to it.
Sure. Awesome. It was a pretty good segue of going into your programming. Can you explain a little bit about just elevator speech of programming considerations, whether it be, we talked a little bit about autoregulation, or if you're looking extensively at the power lifts or the Olympic lifts, what that looks like on a day-to-day basis, what that looks like on an annual basis for you and your athletes.
So kind of going into our programming, first and foremost with us, and I'm sure with many of the coaches out there, I'm technique oriented first. And I always use the line of, I have my kids start stupid and they end smart, where we start off with more basic minimalistic movements that are easier to teach, and we increase the complexity of that. Maybe as we're starting to teach them how to squat, we learn how to goblet squat. And then after we've learned how to goblet squat, we're going to go into a front squat. And then after we learned how to master the front squat, maybe we get more fancy with it and we start introducing dynamic resistance and things like that, where we're looking bands and chains and different elements of that. And as they progress in their training age, we make movements more complex. Same goes along the lines for our Olympic movements. We're obviously going to teach them how to dumbbell snatch, because that's one of the easiest ones to teach right away. Once we're proficient in that, we're going to start learning pull progressions. I teach a lot of the things out of the hang for simplicity's sake, because we're dealing with large groups. And I'm pretty sure if we put the bar on the floor and we had 80 kids in there and 2 coaches, we'd be going nuts pretty damn quick. But from a programming standpoint, I'm ground-based. I'm a firm believer that if we're going to do anything sport-related, we're going to do it on 2 feet for the most part, and I want to train that way. A very big part and cornerstone of the majority of our programs is going to be Olympic lifting. We normally have one element of Olympic lifting each day, whether that's a snatch variation, a clean variation, jerk variation. We're going to have something like that in the beginning of our program. One interesting thing that I've done with our high school kids, and I'm sure some coaches are going to love it, some coaches are going to disagree with it. I don't back squat my kids. I solely front squat them. Multiple reasons for that. One, I'm looking for great core development. I don't think you can get much better core development than front squatting. We also look at it from a depth perspective and a teachability standpoint. It's much easier for us with those kids teaching them how to front squat. And I see a lot of times with ankle mobility issues with some of our kids, not saying that we're not going to address the ankle mobility, but I'm not going to sit there and ankle mobility the hell out of them and have high squats and not engage our glute and end up having dysfunction due to that. I'm going to front squat them while we're working at the ankle mobility. And then on top of that, with high school athletes, it's a good safety. It's a built-in safety mechanism for us, because you can't fake a front squat. With our kids, is their front squat, and if they're coming up wrong, what are they going to do? They're going to dump the bar every single time. So that's one element of my program that probably differs from quite a bit of people. What I like doing with our kids is I want to make sure that we always have some type of unilateral lower body movement going on just about every day. I want to make sure that we're training in multiple planes of movement. Very big into making sure we get frontal plane movement done, because we see so many kids that have knee injuries. We see so many kids where the knee injuries, they didn't have enough strength to stop their forces from one direction and go to the other direction. And it drives me nuts because those are the preventable injuries. And if I were to sit here and give you an elevator line of what's my objective, my whole goal is to increase their performance while lowering the risk of injury. And the lowering risk of injury is far more important to me. So as we go along every single phase that we have these kids, we're doing some element of unilateral lower body training. We're doing a boatload of posterior chain work with them, very much so in a controlled environment. And you and I had spoken a little bit about auto-regulatory stuff with our kids. One thing that I really like doing with our athletes, I'm a percentage guy. I really like making sure that everything's honed in. And the reason that I do that with our athletes is because if I'm not dictating what they're doing, I'm going to have one kid that uses the same weight, whether we're doing triples or if we're doing tens. I'm going to have another kid that's getting buried every single time because he's trying to max out and he's getting 2 reps when I want 8. And then I'm going to have another kid that maybe the one rarity, the unicorn, if you will, that gets it and understands, okay, I need to operate here, here, and here. Now, with that being said, with some of our stuff, in order to allow our kids to progress a little bit quicker, we will have elements of auto-regulatory in there where I may assign a percentage load and I'll give them a rep scheme. For example, say we're going 80% and I give them a rep scheme of 3 to 5 reps. Now, the rule for them will be 5 is the goal. If you hit 5, you go up and wait. If you hit 5, you go up and wait. So ideally, the way I explain it to them is 5 is the goal, but reality, I want you to get a good triple in. So as they're going along, they're having to progress up because, oh, okay, I hit 80% for 5. Now I'm going to increase weight and continue on until we get to a solid triple. So we'll have elements of that. I'm a firm believer that our strength and conditioning philosophy is one in which we utilize many different elements. I always term it a philosophy for what we do because I think if we say that it's our system, we're so locked into doing certain things only one way, and you're not open to new ideas, and like there's so many different great systems out there. You've got Cal Dietz system. That's awesome. The triphasic training. I love that. That's really good with some of our intermediate to advanced athletes. You've got the tier system with Joe Ken. I think that's also a great one to use. You have the West Side methodology where you have dynamic and max effort. And I think that all of those have a time and place depending upon the team that you're dealing with, the athletes you have, the time of year it is, and what your overall objective is. So that's why I really like kind of saying to anybody that asks us about what we do there that we have a philosophy. And that philosophy is going to be centered around ground-based movements, Olympic-oriented movements, multi-planar training, and making sure that we keep ourselves in good muscular balance. I'm a firm believer that anytime we're going to push, whether it's down here or up here, we better match that with some pulls and keeping everything in balance. So to prevent the preventables like we had just spoken about.
Excellent. Coach, can you just break down how you're going to orient the athletes week? Do you have them during the school day? Do you have them before or after school? If you do have them during the school, or really however it may be, how many days a week you'll typically see the average student athlete or the entirely committed student athlete? Just to kind of explain that week.
Okay, so basically the way that it breaks down for us at Modern Day, a little over a year and a half ago, we decided that we were going to go to a new block system. So for those of you that are unfamiliar with the block style of classes, we have 8 blocks. Now, for simplicity's sake, we'll say that they're odd and even days. Now, our odd days will have 1, 3, 5, 7 meet. So students will only have 4 classes that day. And then obviously on the even days, we'll have 2, 4, 6, 8 meet. Now, the reason that's a huge benefit for me is what we found my first year at Modern Day, I only had access to the student athletes either before school or after school. So we would have a boatload of kids either getting to campus really early or a boatload of kids staying on campus really late. And we had to make sure that we got all 24 of those programs in throughout the duration of the week. A couple problems that we started seeing with that. First and foremost, they're students first. So student athlete cannot be forgotten. I would have some student athletes that were getting off campus at 8 o'clock at night, and then by the time they get home, it may be 9, it may be even later than that. By the time they've showered, eaten, now they've got to do homework, Or the flip side of it, I'm having student athletes that are getting to campus at 5:45 in the morning, and they're staying there through their practice until 5 o'clock at night. That's damn near a 12-hour workday for them. It's too much. By the time they go home to even look at their studies, they're too tired. So what we looked at and we found from an academic standpoint that we would be better versed to build strength and conditioning, that component of their day, into their academic calendar. So what I've been given now is we have block strength and conditioning classes. So your team is assigned to a specific block. For example, our football program is assigned to block 1. So anytime we have a block 1 day, the first class of their day is going to be strength and conditioning. And that's so on and so forth with a majority of our teams. Now, since we only have 8 blocks and we got 24 sports, obviously not everybody's going to be getting in during the block. But for the most part, a vast majority of our programs are in the block system, and those of which are not in the block system will train after school. So an example of that would be like our swimming program. They decided to utilize their block for pool time because we've got one pool and we have multiple aquatic sports. So they'll use that as their practice time, but then they come in after school. So depending upon the sport, depending upon the time of year, is really going to dictate how often we see them. Programs like football, year-round, I'm going to see them 4 times a week. Programs like water polo, I'm going to see them for the most part 4 times a week. Other sports, track and field, will be 3 times a week, and then as season rolls along, we're looking around 2 to 3, depending upon the time of year. Basketball will start off in fall with 3. Once we get to season, we're looking at 2. So every program's a little bit different based upon their schedule, whether they're traveling. We have a lot of teams that end up going to out-of-state tournaments and things like that. So that's sometimes throwing a little bit of a wrench in the works of getting the kids in. But the nice thing about us having those blocks is, you and I had spoken about it earlier, prior to me having the blocks, I would see a team, say it was a fall sport, I'd see them from July or August all the way through until October or November. And then it's almost like they disappeared. It's like, wait, did they even still go to school here? And you'll see them again the following fall. It's like, wait a second. Now that I have the blocks, I have a captive audience, which is great, because what we want to do is we try to gear as much as we can at Modern Day to a university setting to help kids get set up for success when they get to the collegiate level. And that's not just an athletic standpoint. I'm just talking about everything that we do from an academic standpoint, the way that things are structured for them. We want to mirror the university setting as much as we can to really help them be set up for success. And getting those block classes in place for our student athletes was huge, because now I have the ability to train them all year long. So it's a absolutely huge deal for us that we were able to do that. We're going into our 2nd year of it, and it's been nothing but rave reviews. The coaches love it, the administration loves it, the teachers love it, and most importantly, the student athletes love it, because they're able to get a lot more done throughout their day and have it all done while they're on campus, not have to worry about, am I going to be able to have time to do this? Am I going to have to stay late for strength and conditioning, stuff like that? And it's just made their lives a lot better.
Absolutely. When you introduced those class periods, was there something that had to be taken away from the student schedule?
No, actually there wasn't. What they did is they just retooled their academic day. So in the past, the way that the schedule was set up is we would have 2 days where they went to every single class. And then we would have 2 days that were block days. And then their Friday would be typically a modified schedule where they went to they typically would go to almost every class, but the duration of it would be a little bit shortened. So what they did is we still have the same amount of instructional minutes. They still have the same class load, but the way in which they've set up the hours and the instructional minutes is tweaked to the point where we have the block system set up and in place. So they're getting the exact same amount of instructional time and face time with their teachers. From an academic standpoint, it's been absolutely huge, because we don't have kids that are getting burned out going to chemistry 3rd period every single day.
Right.
And we also do it where it's a rotating block. So classes move throughout the day. So say we started off where it was 2, 4, 6, 8. The next day when it starts, it may go 4, 6, 8-2. See what I'm saying? So it gives them different exposures to their instructors throughout the academic calendar, and
Sure.
it really helps them engage. And the students have absolutely bought into it, and they love it.
Awesome. That's great to hear. Coach, I want to switch gears just a little bit, not too far off track. I want to hear if and how you monitor movement, and is there a specific screen protocol that maybe you use?
In the past, I used FMS, and I think that that's a fairly simplistic one where you can go out and you can get the certification, you can understand how to do it, and for large groups, it works fairly well. Currently for us right now, just the sheer volume of student athletes we have, we don't use a movement screening. So what we'll do as we're watching the athletes, one of our movements that we do during our dynamic warm-up, we want to see how their lunge progressions go. We want to see them do a lunge matrix and see how they're moving lower body-wise. We want to see how they are able to perform body weight movements. And we make a lot of assessment based off of that. We don't follow a specific movement screening anymore. To be honest with you, the main reason we don't is we just don't have the manpower. It would take us too long to get through an entire football team. It would take us too long to get through our track team. And in our eyes, we would rather get into actual movement and diagnosing problems as we're coaching an athlete rather than spending 2 weeks of not doing any training just because we've got to get through A through H and then H through Z, getting through all the movement screening. So us personally at Modern Day, I don't utilize full-on movement screening with our athletes. But as they're going along, we're constantly diagnosing how they're moving, where they're deficient. If we see somebody going valgus as they're squatting, obviously we know that we need to get glutes involved. And we're going to address that. We're going to have each individual athlete where they have their program for the sport, but then what we have is what we term post-work at the end. And if you're a hip issue person, here's your post-work today. If we're having some type of scap stabilization issue, here's your post-work for the day. So we address it throughout their training sessions. But I'd be lying to you if I said that we just had a full-on movement screening that we go through.
Sure, that makes sense. Just, Coach, hang on one second because I'm getting word that maybe one of us is frozen.
Okay.
I can still hear you fine. Can you still hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay. All right. I think we're back up. Coach, I appreciate that. That's great insight, and I think that's where a lot of coaches in our positions are at. We're kind of trying to find the way of how to implement a movement screen if we want to use that, or basically just trying to improve ourselves as coaches and being able to see some things and correct and give feedback on its own.
Absolutely.
This question's coming from Brian Torres. He wants to know what the prevalence of 1, 2, and/or 3 sport athletes are for you, and do you have any involvement from the sport coaches during your training sessions?
First, I'll answer his second part of his question. Yes, we do have quite a bit of involvement with our sport coaches. For the most part, sport coaches are going to be present every single time that we train, which is great because it's showing that they truly care about the strength and conditioning aspect of preparing their athletes. So I do get a lot of coach involvement, and it's nothing but positive. We're not having those coaches that are looking over our shoulder going like, well, back in my day, we did this. Our coaches are very open to learning about our methods. I have open, constant communication with all of our coaches. I do the same with our student athletes. I tell both our coaches and student athletes, if you want to know why we're doing something, ask me. Because if I can't supply you an answer, I'm wasting all your time. We need to make sure that we explain it to you as to why it's important that we do these certain movements. Now, in regard to the multi-sport athlete, we do still see it. Sadly, in our day and age now, we don't see it enough, in my opinion. I feel that we need to have athletes that are stepping away from their sport maybe for a competitive season and doing something else because we're seeing so many kids specialize at such a young age. I'll use an example of pitchers. You look at baseball kids and they just play baseball, play baseball, play baseball. By the time they get to be a junior or senior in high school, their arm's shot because they've been throwing too much, and they've had club coaches and travel ball coaches that don't keep track of how many pitches they're throwing. But more importantly than that is they can't move outside of things that are specifically related to baseball. And when they're not able to move like that, what ends up happening is we see huge injury rates. I really wish that we would have more student athletes participate in other sports. I still have student athletes that are multi-sport athletes, but in all honesty, the lion's share of my athletes are insert whatever sport name, that's what they do, and they do that all year long. Now I have a handful of kids that'll do football, track and field, or I'll have, football, baseball is a big one with some of our guys. And for our female sports, you'll see soccer, track and field, things like that. But for the most part, majority of our student athletes are kind of honed into their specific sport. And from my standpoint, I really wish that we had them engaging in other sports as well, because it breaks up a little bit of the monotony of constantly doing the same thing. It prevents a little bit of burnout. But from a movement standpoint, I think it's great for them to have exposure to different stimulus, to be able to have to move differently and compete in different sports. And we're seeing the research behind it. I mean, you look at so many of these top level athletes, whether it's the collegiate or professional level, and you do a breakdown and you see that they did multiple sports.
Sure.
Majority, like some of our most successful athletes were not just great basketball players in high school or just great football players. They engaged in other sports, and I think that's huge for our kids just to be able to learn how to move better. We do come across it. We'll have some sports that overlap, and that's where it's my job as a professional. Okay, say we're winding down with one season and just starting up the other one. The priority is going to always go to the season that they're currently in. You know, if they're a volleyball athlete, or girls volleyball goes during fall, say they're a girls volleyball athlete and their season's winding down, but they also play basketball. Well, basketball is just about to pick up. I'm worried about the current sport that's in season right now, volleyball, and then I'll begin to transition them into the basketball aspect of it. But like I said, I mean, sadly, we see it fewer and fewer year in, year out. It's almost as if the multi-sport athlete's kind of beginning to phase its way out, and I wish that it wasn't that way.
Sure. Coach, do you have any sort of competitive weightlifting team or anything on campus?
We don't. Currently, we do not. I think that's actually something that I would like to look into with our athletes. Unfortunately, in California, I know in certain areas like Oklahoma and Texas, and I don't know how it is in Florida, but they'll actually have powerlifting as a sport. I think that would be awesome if we had that out here. Yeah. But unfortunately, right now, we don't.
Yeah, I don't think you want to hear what our competitive weightlifting is here.
What is it?
It's clean and jerk and bench press.
So we're just going to go a little bit of everything, huh?
Yeah, it was created by and what they thought was for football coaches.
Oh man!
I don't know.
They'll clean and jerk and they'll bench, but we have no idea. Oh wow, that's an interesting combination. I'm sure that they have some great pressers.
Yeah, I mean, they don't want to snatch, and this obviously isn't anything negative towards our activities association or anything like that, but they don't want to snatch because they fear of the overhead. But we're jerking probably more weight, and it's very interesting. I know
that's an interesting combination, to say the least.
Yeah, I know USA Weightlifting doesn't like it very much.
I would imagine not.
Yeah, it's like, are we powerlifting or are we weightlifting? Which one is it? And it gets funky. So that's actually a team that I would rather not. I would rather us not compete.
I don't blame you there. I don't blame you there.
Yeah, I would rather us not compete in, because it would be it doesn't fit where we're at. So anyway, I appreciate that.
I imagine some of the top level benchers aren't exactly the most mobile to be able to clean fairly well, though.
No, it's
like that's where I'm seeing a nightmare, because I'm picturing in my mind some world-class level bench pressers and imagining them trying to even rack a clean. I just wow. I'm gonna have to YouTube that when we're done.
Yeah, you've got some, and you have some phenomenal lifters also that do really well, that are just, they're an ox or they're oxen, and are incredibly strong, especially at their body weight, and they're good movers, and they're efficient in their Olympic lifts, and then it either goes they're incredibly efficient and strong in the Olympic lifts, or they're incredibly strong in the bench press, and usually the other kind of lags behind.
Yeah, that happening.
So it's interesting. Anyway, we've got an interesting setup down here. Somewhat shifting gears again, I don't think I got to it when we started talking about monitoring movement, but it also came into the fold when Coach Torres asked about who's in the weight room when you're going through your sessions. Do you have an athletic trainer on campus, and is it full time? And just kind of explain that setup a little, if you would.
Okay, we have 2 full-time athletic trainers. For the most part, during our blocks, they're not going to be covered by the athletic trainers simply because they have obligations after school into the late evening hours, whether it's for practices, competitions, things like that. We do have full-time ATCs, which is great because I can refer any student athletes of ours that are having any type of issue to see our ATC to get evaluated. It may not be immediately. They may not be working with me in the weight room. I can say, hey, go see our ATC and see what the trainer says, and then come back and we'll work from there. It may be, all right, I'm going to make a judgment call and shut you down on these specific movements. We're going to train around what the issue may be. We're going to talk with our ATs, and we'll move forward from there. The other thing that we do have from a safety standpoint is we have a full-time nurse on campus as well, which is beneficial to us. You know, God forbid, you know, unfortunately in the world of the weight room, there's going to be some type of injury some point or another, you know, whether it's a kid not paying attention and having a weight get dropped on their toe, or, you know, they slam the weight out to the side rather than sit up with them. They bust their finger. We do have people that are able to cover those things, which is fantastic for us, you know, because you want to make sure that you're providing an environment that is nothing but safe for our kids. So we do have 2 full-time ATCs as well as a full-time nurse.
Awesome. And Coach, can you explain, you said on the front end that you had I'm not sure if you used the words full-time, but I know you have an assistant. Can you explain maybe how that got lined up? Was this always kind of in the works that there would be 2 full-time coaches on campus, or is that something you pushed for? And who is that coach?
So my full-time assistant is Katie Janes. She does a phenomenal job for me. Young up-and-coming strength and conditioning coach. I think that you'll end up seeing her name throughout the years because she's very good at what she does. The way that it came about was when I was offered the position in Modern Day to be the head strength and conditioning coach, they had already built into where there would be an assistant. Now, I had my choice of 2 part-time assistants or 1 full-time benefited assistant. I chose the full-time benefited assistant, 1, because it's a much more lucrative job that somebody's going to be going for. And the reason that I wanted that is I wanted somebody that was going to be there for more than 6 months. You know, I wanted to make sure that we got somebody in and we took care of them to make sure that they had a reason to want to stay rather than just get something on their resume. Hey, thank you for your time and the experience. I got this full-time job now. So as we were going through it and I was building out the department after being hired, they gave me the option of 2 part-times or 1 full-time. And I went with a full-time assistant, and I would not do it any differently. You know, my best advice in the very beginning, I think that it looks easier because you have 2 different people rather than just 1, but you're going to be juggling a whole bunch of different schedules. And I think from a continuity standpoint, I have somebody where it's not a revolving door and I have a different assistant coming in. My student athletes and the teams that I've turned over to my assistant, she's always with them. You know, it's not some new face every 6 months or a year or whatever the case may be. My advice to anybody where they're being given that option, I would always take the full-time benefited position, because if you prove to the department that you can do it with just the part-time assistants, that's probably what you're going to be doing for the rest of the time there, because it's going to be hard to go back and justify, well, hey, we're being successful with this. If they're going to offer it to you as a full-time position, I would take that over they could have told me there would have been 3 part-time assistants, and I would have said, no, I want 1 full-time. So that's where we're fortunate in that aspect, because I have an assistant that I can rely on, that understands my philosophy, that understands how I expect things to be done. And it's been a huge asset for me to have.
And Coach, along that piece, have you utilized any sort of internship program, or is there anybody else that comes through the program that helps you guys out?
We'll make sure that we get our coaches versed enough to be able to assist us, the ones that are present in the weight room, so they can be another set of eyes from a safety standpoint. I've kind of stayed away from the internship program simply because we're working with high school age kids.
Sure.
And that there's no way to sugarcoat it. It does frighten me a little bit bringing somebody from the outside, that even though we take them through a thorough background check, I want to make sure that I know exactly who's working with our student athletes. I want to make sure that we have quality people with them. And I'm a little leery of opening up that Pandora's box of having a pipeline of college age kids coming through working with my high school age athletes. You know, that's it's not something that I'm 100% opposed to, but I'm definitely not 100% on board with either.
Sure. No, yeah, that's 100% respectable and commendable. I think it's, and for coaches that do have an internship program, myself included, I think you saying that just makes me think about it twice. Not necessarily, I do enjoy having, and we've had great success, and luckily we've had, it's been more so volunteer roles from coaches that have been in the game a little bit longer, and we kind of just got lucky. We just got lucky and got coaches between jobs and things like that. But I think that's a very, very important piece for somebody that's thinking about starting up an internship program is
because I mean, realistically, you do have to look at it from a liability standpoint.
Absolutely. That's
you may get an amazing applicant that passes every single background check, and God forbid something goes wrong. I personally wouldn't want that on my conscience. That's why I don't have it. You know, and I know that there's probably a lot of coaches out there shaking their head going like, that's a terrific resource that you can utilize. I'm fortunate in the sense that I have a plethora of sport coaches and assistant sport coaches that are on campus that are already a part of our modern day family that I can rely upon when we need extra hands and extra help. And then also we're fortunate in the sense that the way that our day is laid out with our block system, we're not overwhelmed when it's just the two of us there. You know, we're able to space our athletes out where we're not having 200 kids come storming through in an hour and 20 minutes. You know what I mean? So we're very fortunate in that sense. And I completely understand why coaches utilize interns. When I was in the private sector, I utilized interns all the time. When I was at the collegiate setting, I utilized interns all the time. I just think from the high school standpoint, I'm a little leery of it, personally.
That's a very good point. And no, it's something that we think about on a daily basis all around us, liability, and really more importantly, just taking care of our kids, our students, and making sure that's
my priority number one. You know, like I tell the kids there that I'm there 100% to help them. You know, that is my job, is to help them. I'm not there to be the guy that's getting on them, making them do things that they don't want to do, and this is not fun. Like, I'm here to help you get better. And at the same time, I'm also there to make sure that they're doing so in a safe, controlled environment. And I want their best interests always at the forefront of whatever we do.
Sure. Well, that's awesome. And I can sense it even through that explanation. That, just like I said, I think it's something that's very important for us to think about, regardless of what side of that, if there is a fence. I don't think there's a fence, but regardless of what side of that thought process you're on, I think it's certainly something to think about. Coach, I want to get in. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
I was just agreeing with you. I think that it's definitely something you have to think about.
Yeah, for sure. Coach Cameron Gentry has a question. Do you specialize the training towards a particular athlete's sport? And he provided some examples, maybe some more shoulder mobility and strength for swimmers, or lower body power for football players.
Absolutely. You know, one of the first things that you got to look at when you're doing program design is what is the metabolic demand of the sport. And I think that that's a number one thing that you have to look at, because I can't turn jumpers into joggers and I can't turn joggers into jumpers. Sure. I don't want to train my cross-country athlete like a linebacker. I don't want to train my linebacker like a point guard. You know, every sport is going to have their different elements. So I think that you need to look first and foremost at the metabolic demand of the sport to see what energy system needs to be taxed. A sport like football, obviously, it's a very anaerobic sport. So we need to make sure that we're training it as such. When we're looking at other sports, you know, track and field is always a great example to use when it comes to periodization and the way that you train people. Track and field, in my eyes, from a programming standpoint, that's 5 programs into one team. You know, because I'm not going to train my distance runners the same as my 100 and 200 meter and even 400 meter sprinters. And furthermore, even possibly my 800 meter sprints. You know, I'm going to have my sprints program. I'm going to have my jumpers program. I'm going to have my throwers program, pole vault. as well as cross country. So depending upon the sport is going to be dependent upon what we do from a training standpoint. Now, with that being said, I do feel that there are some cornerstone movements that just about every athlete is going to benefit from. I think that every athlete needs to understand how to squat. Every athlete needs to understand how to pull weight. Every athlete needs to understand proper pressing and rowing mechanics and things of that nature. Now, the way in which we utilize those is obviously going to be different from sport to sport. Now, touching on when they were saying, you know, we're looking at scap stabilization for swimmers, you're going to look at that for swimmers. You're going to look at that. I would even term a swimmer as an overhead athlete, in the sense that my volleyball athletes need scap stabilization. My pole vaulters do. My baseball athletes, my softball players, you know, you can keep going down the list. What I do, rather than just saying this specific sport needs this, I look at the sport and see what some of the key injury areas are. You know, you look at sports like basketball. We end up getting rolled ankles, tweaked knees, things of that nature. We want to make sure that we're spending some time where we're doing a lot of unilateral leg exercises, where we're making sure that we're taking time to get some ankle flexibility and strengthening in it, whether it's pre or post work. As much as I hate that term prehab, you know, we want to make sure that we're spending some time on it for those common injury areas. So to look at it and say like we just have a cookie cutter program for our athletes across the board, we absolutely don't. We want to make sure that every single sport is 100% geared towards the physical demands and metabolic demands of what they're going to do.
Right on, Coach. I appreciate that, and I know Coach Gentry also appreciates it. I'm gonna close those questions out, and I'll ask a couple to close it out and get you on your way, because we started a little late, and I want to make sure we get you to go enjoy some time on your own and get you off here. So, Coach, I want to ask, number one, I can certainly tell your passion not only in the profession but for modern day. So let's assume, like you said on the front end, you're there for the entirety of your career, hopefully a long and fruitful one. That you spend your career there, and 10 years down the line, what does it look like at modern day? What does it look like for you? What's your vision of the program there? What's your vision at yourself as a professional and developing in that way 10 years from now?
I think 10 years from now, what I would really like to see, we're constantly growing our program. You know, we're in our infancy here at Modern Day. We're almost midway through year 3 now, looking at it from the summer standpoint. But as we continue to grow it out, I want to be able to start adding other staff members. You know, I want to be able to grow the department in itself to where we have more than just 2 full-timers. Maybe that starts off where I only get my foot in the door and we get just a part-timer at the time, and then argue it to try and get that to a full-time position. I'm hoping that as we go along that they look to add another full-time position. I think that would be first and foremost what I would like to see added, just to grow the staff out. The other areas that I want to see, with the demand that we've created what I term a positive problem. We're outgrowing the space that we're in. You know, I have roughly a 5,000 square foot weight room, which I'm sure many coaches, I'm very grateful for it. Don't get me wrong. Do not get me wrong. I love my weight room. I love my facility, but we're outgrowing it, you know, where we have the demand where multiple teams want to get in more than they did in the past. And I only have so many hours in the day. So I think 10 years down the road, we're landlocked. So that brings up some interesting possibilities of how we would expand, whether it be, if there's a new building going in, do we build a giant weight room in the basement? Do we build a second facility somewhere? So we'll have to get creative with that. I just want to continue to grow our program out as we go along year by year. I think 10 years from now, one thing that I definitely want to do is be able to look back 10 years from now and see the things that I did and be able to say, okay, well, this worked, that didn't. Here's how we adapted. These are the changes we underwent, and see the evolution as we continue to learn and grow our program. You know, I think the biggest mistake would be if 10 years from now, you and I sit down and have this conversation and everything I'm doing is the exact same. You know, there's going to be some cornerstones that I keep in there probably throughout the duration of my strength and conditioning career. But I look back to things that I did 5 years ago. I look back to things I did 10 years ago currently. And I do things much differently now. And it's just because I've had conversations with people like you and other people in the profession, and seeing it through a different set of eyes, and constantly learning and reading and going out to different conferences and conventions and finding new methods of doing it. So I think the three things that I would hit on would be, one, I would want to develop my staff further. I'm hoping 10 years from now that my assistant is a head coach somewhere or an administrator somewhere, whatever her goal may be. I want to be able to have that coaching tree that kind of branches out and has people where it's like, oh, okay, you're from the modern day coaching tree. I'd like to build a program to that point where people are looked at as, hey, that's going to be a successful person. Let's bring them in. So from a selfish standpoint, I would want to grow my coaching tree. I'd also want to see that our facilities expand as well as bolster our staff a little bit. And then, like I was just touching on, I want to make sure that 10 years from now, I look back and I understood what worked. I understood what was not working. I looked at how I changed it, and I could just see the evolution of my program, because I really, truly, honestly believe that strength coaches are constantly evolving. And if you're not constantly evolving and you're not constantly questioning and trying to find new methods and new ways, it might be time to hang it up. Because obviously some of the passion that you had originally when you got into this, maybe it died a little bit. And if the passion's dying, how are you going to inspire kids?
Right. Well, Coach, I appreciate that. And it's going to be very exciting to see, just knowing the impact that I can tell that you've had at Mater Dei in 3 years of young boys and girls' lives. The next 10, I think I can speak for all of us in saying that we're very excited to see what transpires. And I know those goals and aspirations that you have, and they're not selfish in any way. I'm excited to see the Mater Dei coaching tree grow as well, and that's something that I want to see grow. And hopefully we'll have multiple coaches, and we'll just say another coach that came from Coach Vandermade's tree is on the roundtable. That would be pretty awesome.
God, that they're far better than me.
Well, yeah, that's always our goal, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely, Coach. I appreciate that. And along with that, I want to ask what you see in the next 10 years for the profession, and not necessarily just an umbrella strength and conditioning answer. Let's talk about the high school level and what you see transpiring now, what you think's maybe a projection. It doesn't have to be Nostradamus or anything like that, but something that you think is going to happen for these next 10 years, what you think it's going to look like in 10 years. And maybe if there's something that the coaches on here can do about it, and either assist that along or change the tide, whatever it may be that coaches that are watching right now might be able to do to create a promising next 10 years.
I think that's a fantastic question. I really, honestly, truly believe over the course of the next 10 years, we're going to see a very big expansion in the high school strength and conditioning world. I think that it's probably safe to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a majority of the high school strength coaches right now across the country, I would say a majority of them are probably in private school settings right now.
Yeah.
Would you agree? Yeah, I would say.
I would agree.
A majority of them are in the private school settings. I think we're going to see a shift to where you start getting some more public schools that are looking into having strength and conditioning. I think it'll start off in the sense that they'll outsource it in the beginning, and then they're going to realize, okay, we've got 5, 6, 7, 10 different sport programs all using different people for strength and conditioning. Wouldn't it make sense from a continuity standpoint, and also realistically from a liability standpoint, to make sure that everybody's under one program, that we know what we're getting, and it's not just some fly-by-night company, and that's no knock on anybody that's in the private setting, but they know exactly what they're getting. I really see it growing in the next 10 years into the public school setting, and I think the driving force behind that, and what a lot of coaches can do to really help push that, is I know just about every strength and conditioning coach that I know at the high school level, when they get their program up and running, one of the number one things that they're commended on is you see the injury rates drop. You see time missed from games drop. You see athletes with lower risk of injury, and that's a huge thing, not only to the schools, but more importantly to the parents and the students there. They're seeing that the safety of their children is being put first and foremost. And I think that's going to be kind of a driving force behind it. The sport performance aspect of it, it's huge, and we all love it. But a big part of what we do is making sure that we're taking away some of the risk that is involved with sport. And I think that public schools are going to start looking at that and going like, well, how do we make the athletics and activities safer for our student athletes? Here's what we need to do. This is the type of model that we should be seeing. And, you know, I've heard through the grapevine of certain schools and certain school districts in California that are looking into it, and they're in the infancy of like, hey, you know, are we able to do this? I think that we're still a few years away from it, because I know in my hometown where I grew up in, that they've just gotten to the point where the local high schools there have athletic trainers. You know, so I think that a head strength and conditioning coach may be a few more years away, but I think that they're starting to see the importance of having people that are there to take care of the student athlete and make sure that everything is up and running properly. And it's not just somebody that maybe had a little bit of a background in weightlifting in the past and was just kind of regurgitating what they did when they were a sophomore in high school or a junior in college and this and that. I really think that the profession in itself at the high school level especially is going to continue to grow. Because you and I had spoken about before when we had our initial conversation, strength and conditioning as a profession in itself is still in its infancy in the States. You know, we go back to Boyd Epley, like to some of us that seems like eons ago, but it's not that long ago. You know, like it's still in its infancy, it's still growing, and the more success that we have as professionals in helping these athletes achieve their goals and dreams and making sure that we're helping improve their performance at the same time, maybe preventing that ACL tear from happening. You know, maybe making sure that we help rehab them from a rolled ankle or a tweaked hamstring and this and that. The value is already there. It's a matter of making sure that everybody understands the value of it. And I really see big things, especially on the high school horizon, in the next 10 years. And I really hope that the profession continues to grow at the rate that it is.
Yes, sir. And thank you for that. Thank you for those thoughts. I think one thing that just when I automatically agreed with most coaches being in the private school setting, you know, we found, I think, as the high school kind of strength and conditioning coaching family has grown, you meet a lot more coaches that are at public schools. And that's why I hesitate to say necessarily that there's more strength coaches at private schools. I think the budget, resources, official title and positions, and ability to commit yourself solely to strength and conditioning is tremendously shifted towards the private schools. But there are a lot of phenomenal coaches at public schools that just like I said, that the resources, the budget, we're unable to even get to know some of these coaches.
Yeah, exactly. And they're having to wear multiple hats.
Right. And you know, like
I think that you just touched on a very good point. You know, there are some phenomenal coaches out there, and insert whatever sport they may coach, in addition to being the strength and conditioning coach, or in addition to being a phys ed teacher, or so on and so forth. You know, there are tremendous coaches out there that we need to get it to the point where, hey, let's let them work just as a strength and conditioning coach, do their life's passion, do what they're 100% best at, and it's going to have a tremendous impact on all the students' lives.
Yeah, it just reminds me, it's kind of like a microcosm or another display of you changing your schedule around for the kids. If then you provide the resources and allow a coach to, you know, because there's some strength coaches at high schools that are history teachers and open up the weight room and handle business after school. And those are some of the most creative coaches you'll ever meet, or that I have.
Absolutely.
And then if you just kind of stop making, you know, maybe not making them, but take a hat or two away from that coach and give them the ability to plan their day and orient their day that will fit what's best for their schedule. It'll be best for that coach. It'll be best for that person. And in turn, it's best for the kids. And that's why we're having this conversation anyway.
Yeah. And it's like you and I had said before when we had our initial phone call before we did this, and it was in regard to the block setting. Now, when I first started at Modern Day, I had access in the morning, I had access in the afternoons. When we went to the block system, it wasn't because it was going to make my day easier. It was because it was going to make me more efficient. It was going to allow me to have more exposure, multiple exposures to our student athletes, and overall benefit our kids. You know, and I really agree with you there in the sense that if we allow these people to do what they're best at and maybe take one of the multiple responsibilities that they have off of their plate and allow them to focus a little bit more on the strength and conditioning element, it's going to the rewards will be tenfold. You know,
Absolutely.
it'll absolutely be tenfold, because the kids really, in my experience, and I'm sure I'm speaking for a lot of coaches that are watching us tonight, the kids really engage at this level because they understand and they're sponges and they want to absorb and they want to learn these things. And when you give them more opportunities to do so, when we have like our Thanksgiving holiday that's coming up, school's going to be closed. I'm going to have open hours, and I'm going to have a lot of kids show up.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to have a lot of kids show up because they love what we do, and they buy into what we do. And I think that would be a great thing to do across the board at so many schools, because you have these kids buying in even more to what you're doing on campus, and it's an outlet for them to have another activity or something to occupy some of their day.
Absolutely, Coach, and yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think we're certainly on the same page as far as that goes. That's something that's very important to all of us. I just want to close out with one more question, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no problem.
It's advice for coaches like myself, or even coaches that have gotten on board with these roundtables and maybe some of the various social media avenues and platforms that this will be shared on. Oftentimes we want to know if you have any advice for younger coaches, for maybe even some of the coaches that are, don't know which route they're going to go in the profession yet, and they're still in school and they're still figuring out some academic deals. But just a piece of advice maybe for the young coaches out there.
I think one of the best things you can do is get out and meet different people in the profession. It's amazing to do roundtables like this. It's amazing to go out to different NSCA clinics or Perform Better clinics or insert whatever association's putting on a clinic, a CSCCA, any of those, because you're able to network with these people and you're able to kind of see exactly what their job entails. And when you get the opportunity to go out and see what another coach does, or just sit down and have lunch with the coach and kind of brainstorm different ideas, like, hey, what's your take on this? What's your take on that? Getting out and meeting the people that are in the profession is one of the best things that you can do, because you're going to be able to get some great ideas from coaches. And I'm not saying that you have to go out and intern for everybody or anything like that. I'm just saying get out and get to know some people at these clinics, ask questions. I think that we have gotten to the point where, and this is our society in general, so excuse me if I go on a tangent, everybody knows everything about everything. It's like, oh, no, I already know that. It's like, well, that's fantastic. We may know the book like the back of our hand, but do you know the practical applications? Do you know how this is actually going to work? Because I don't know about all you coaches out there, but for myself included, I've got a very nice facility, but I can't have at certain times every single student athlete start with their Olympic lift. And I know some kids are going to sit there and be like, wait a second, the book says here that you have to do this first. It's like, well, there's reality, and then there's the perfect world of the book. And you don't always understand those things unless you meet with some of the practitioners that are in it day to day. And, going through it and having to deal with scheduling conflicts and how do you handle with a coach that's opposed to this. I think that our educational system, especially at the collegiate level right now in the universities, and teaching everybody the hows and the whys is fantastic. But I think actually applying that is a little bit behind because they don't have the hands-on experience. So I think getting out and talking with people that are living it each and every day, well, how do you address this? What do you do when this type of problem comes up? You have this parent saying this. I think it's good experiences because then you hear it from somebody that's been through it. I'm a big believer in, if I don't know something, I'm going to find somebody that does. And I'm going to find out as much as I can about that from somebody that knows more than me and has more experience than me. I think for the young up-and-coming coaches, that's probably one of the best things they can do is just get out there and get to know some different coaches. Get out there and experience something that's different than what you do, because a lot of times we get so locked in to our systems or, I'll even myself with our philosophy, we need to make sure that we're branching out. We're learning from different practitioners, reading things that are not just assigned textbooks. There's a lot of great authors out there that may not be in the assigned text. And that's probably the best things that you can do. And never hurts to get under a bar either, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, coach, and I appreciate that. And I can tell just by the language you're using and saying I and me, you evidently live it still to this day. So that's advice for young coaches, but that's also advice for coaches throughout your career.
Exactly.
Is how I receive that. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Coach, that's it. Hey, I really appreciate your time. That was the last question I have for you. I know that just seeing the feedback among the group, everybody's really incredibly appreciative and got a lot out of this. I thought it was awesome. I can close this out in understanding of kind of your daily schedule, your weekly schedule, what kids you're working with, who you see on a daily basis, and an understanding of your philosophy is something that's very important to myself, and I know very important to the coaches that wanted to come on here and be able to hear you talk and have you answer some of their questions. So I know that we went longer than expected, and that was just because it was going so well and we were learning so much from you, and a lot of coaches had a lot of questions. So I really, really appreciate you taking your time. I appreciate the time before this even and kind of preparing for it and your willingness to answer some questions on the fly and willingness to really get to know us and allow us to get to know you, Coach. I really appreciate it.
No, let me say thank you to you for having me be a part of this. It was absolutely a pleasure and an honor to be able to do so. So I really thank you. I also got to say thank you to Carl Galloway for inviting me to do this as well. You know, I got to give shout outs to both you guys because this was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. And I thank everybody that was able to take part in this and the questions and letting me ramble for a little bit and steal some of your evening away from you guys. So I appreciate that. And you know, in closing for me, if anybody has any questions that I can further assist them with, please don't hesitate to reach out. My email is pretty easy to find. My last name may be a pain to spell, but it's my email is just going to be gvandermade@modernday.org. And if you have any questions, and if there's ever any way that I can help you out in regard to strength and conditioning, let me know, you know, because I had a lot of people that helped me get to the position I'm in. And I'm very much a pay it forward type of guy. So if there's anything I can do to help anybody out, please let me know.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Coach. Again, thank you so much for your night. What I'm going to do, I'm going to cut this broadcast off and we'll keep on the line and we'll just talk for a few seconds more because I know we discussed it a little bit, but we'll talk a little bit more about who the next guest is you'll want to see. And just like I said, I'll let you get on and enjoy your evening. Again, Coach, I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Take care.